I can say that this last hour, half an hour, I don't know what time, I have no idea how much time it lasts because I was listening, has been an absolute pleasure for me. It has been, I was asked to just make mention a few things, what it takes for a community to work together. What does it really take? How can different cultures be blended? How can people understand each other? How can our views be respected? Those are all questions that I'm going to talk a little bit about. One of the main answers to all those questions has already been covered. That's when we have compassion and when we communicate. And as soon as we think that we know everything, we're in extremely dangerous grounds, because then we start locking horns, and nobody gains anything from a locked horn situation. So this morning I don't want to take too much time, because I would like to give John Trier and John Bontrager time to explain how the system works, but yet I'm going to give an overall view. I want to give an overall view. I want to explain to the plain community why we need to reach out, why we need to go to hospitals, why we can't just sit at home, because they have things to offer to us. I want to explain that to them. And I also want to explain to the hospital why they need to understand how comes we're reluctant to come in sometimes. So that both parties that we can mesh, that we can get together, that we can understand each other, that we can work together and continue in our journey through life. And I wasn't sure where to start. I wasn't sure, should I start talking to the plain people and explaining to them why they need to go to the hospital? Should I talk to the hospital staff, to anybody else who's out here, to explain why they should understand our way of thinking? I still don't know. So bear with me. I'll just try to jump into this and explain things, and I'll probably jump in explaining what burdock is, what B&W is, and how we do things and why we do things the way we do. Because when I first began, this goes back probably 20 years ago. I don't even know when it was. There was a little 2-year-old boy that he poured some hot chocolate syrup over his stomach area. He was put into the hospital. We asked for permission to try to dress him with burdock and B&W. Back in those times, that's 20 years ago, that was unheard of. In any circles, in any hospital circles at least. Now we can look up on the internet and you get all kinds of information. Back then you couldn't. And I'll just take a few minutes to explain this. The doctor that did the skin grafting was very nice. I appreciate him, but he was very firm. He told us that no, this is a child. This will never work. What you're doing will never work. We are going to skin graft. We will skin graft. So the parents consented. We went through the process. The skin grafting was done. And to the doctor's greatest nightmare, what happened? Got infection, lost all the skin grafting. Of all the patients for it to happen to, he told me this is the last one I wanted it to happen, because the parents were so reluctant. And I kind of forced them into it, and now it had to happen this way. So what happens? What happens to all of us? What happens to all of us when we get in a tight corner? We tend to kind of forcefully say things. We tend to, okay, and then really lash out on what we shouldn't. We shouldn't, but we do. That's a human nature. That's a human element. So the mother of the child was there. The doctor walked over and looked at her and says, okay, we have this case, and it didn't turn out the way I wanted it to turn out. What do you want to do? And the poor mother said, what am I doing wrong? Why is the doctor raising his voice? Why is the doctor saying this to me? What's going on? What did I do wrong? I was trying to work with him. And she said, well, we'd like to put on burdock and B&W. Well, okay, I'm not going to stand in your way. Do it. And this was on a Friday afternoon. He turned around, walked away. And this poor mother, who was very timid anyway, she started, looked around and they called out to me and they said, come into the hospital and bring your burdock and B&W along. We have a patient in here we need to dress. I said, no. This won't work, because I just got done talking to the doctor. This won't work. Yeah, come on in. Oh, no. So when I got in, I asked the mother, what happened? And she says, she was still very, very emotional. I don't know what I did wrong. But the doctor was angry. And he finally just threw up his hands. He said, do what you want to do. I'm not going to interfere. So when that case, I looked at her and I tried to reassure her that no, the doctor wasn't angry. He was frustrated because things did not turn out the way he had hoped they would turn out. And that happens to all of us. Sometimes things don't turn out the way we want them to turn out. And we take and other people look at us, oh, why did I do wrong? Well, it wasn't you, it was our walk of life and what happened. Going on with my story, this was Friday evening, and true to the doctor's word, he had given orders to the nurses' station that they were supposed to help us. So they helped us apply this burdock and B&W. Remember, this is back almost 20 years. This is unheard of. This is not, this can't work. There's not enough literature out there. There's not enough knowledge out there. So we dressed him, gave direction to the morning nurses how to do it. They actually did it themselves the next morning with the help of the mother and the father. I was in Saturday evening, did the same thing again. I switched over to Sunday morning, went back again, did the same thing. Everything was going great. Sunday evening, it had made a tremendous change in the meantime. One of the things, and I'm going to be talking about this and I'm going to be explaining it later, but one of the things that I noticed was I don't know how to explain this. The first time I walked in our language, the people of our people can understand it. It smelled like a chicken who's been dead and laying out behind the barn for a while. That's the kind of odor that was coming off. So when this was all cleaned up, there was no more smell there. It was gone. Those dead tissues had been cleaned. So I hadn't seen the doctor all this time because he was determined not to come in. He had given orders to the nurses that if something turns up that they're alarmed of, they were supposed to let him know, and he was going to come in and stop the work right there, which we had agreed to, which was fine, because we did not want this child to suffer. So then, coming Monday morning, I walked in. By that time, I was fairly confident. Okay, so this is, this is real. This is happening. I never imagined that it would, but it is actually happening. And I met a nurse who had been working for 22 years in the burn unit. And I immediately felt the atmosphere was different. I hadn't said a word, but I walked into this room and everything was tense. Everything was just tied up. So she was going back and forth. She didn't talk to me. She was going back and forth. Finally, she comes over to me and says, I don't know what's going on, but we can't put the buggy in front of the horse. This has never happened before. You can't come in here. You have no license. You can't come here and address a burn that's been on a child that's this serious. You can't do that. Okay. But she says, she waited a few minutes and she says, but I can't stop you. I can't find a doctor who will overrule this. There's no doctor in the whole hospital to tell me that they can stop this. Oh, well, I knew that because the doctor who had given us permission was the head doctor. So I knew there was nobody that was going to overrule that kind of a situation. So when she begrudgingly helped us do the dressing, it was tense all the way through, completely tense. Before this, it was very relaxed. All the nurses were helpful. This was not an unpleasant experience. I tried to be cheerful. I tried to, make small talk, communicate, do what we can, but it was very tense. It was just, you could cut the air. It was so tense. It was just that way. The next morning, actually that was Monday morning. The next morning, when Tuesday, the doctor came in on Monday afterwards, and they took a peep at what. The nurses were always taking photos of it. They were showing the doctor. They were keeping him updated. It wasn't that they were neglecting the case. But when he came in later on Monday, he okayed us to go on. He said he wants to talk to me. He had kind of made an appointment. He wanted to meet me and find out where we're going. So when Tuesday morning when I came in, the atmosphere was a little bit better. It was a little bit better, but I was met as I came in and it was a strange request. If I would consent to sign that I won't go through the hospital and peddle what I'm doing. Well, I said, I have no problem with that. And there was a lot of other things that I had to sign, how much, if I can't get back to them with insurance and all that thing. It was the administration that had gotten a hold of this. And with administration, there was all kinds of laws that had to be put back in place. But they worked with us. There were some things that I couldn't conscientiously do. They said, well, stroke it out. We want you to sign this document. Just stroke out what you can't do. So I stroked out what I was not comfortable with, and went to the bottom, and I signed it. And we worked with that doctor. He actually came in later that week. It was on a Wednesday evening. We had made an appointment to meet because then he wanted to reassess this thing. He said, I've given you enough time now. I want to reassess this thing. So, how's my time doing? I don't want to take too much time away, but I need to finish the story because this is a tremendous story. It's a real life story. It has to do with how we relate to each other. When the doctor came in that evening, he undressed the wound area, and he looked at it. And I was I was sitting back a little bit back from the patient on a chair. He was beside the bed. The nurse was on the other side of the bed, and this little 2-year-old boy was laying there, and he had his chest wound. It was really seriously burned. And the doctor looked at it. He looked, and he looked, and during the time he was looking, subconsciously he was always rubbing that one leg. His hand was going back and forth on the patient's leg. And he kept looking. And he kept looking, and it seemed like a long time to me. But that always seems long when you're in suspense, when you're sitting somewhere, and you don't know what the other person's thinking. But he kept rubbing this leg, and he kept rubbing this leg, not saying one word, not saying yea or nay. And then the nurse who was on the other side said, well, maybe you should start rubbing the other leg, or we have one leg on this patient that's longer than the other. Which I thought was an excellent thing to say because, you're breaking the ice without putting him in any situation because he's been quiet long enough. It's time to move on. Which when it comes to human relationships, I give that nurse a lot of credit. She was able to pull the thing together in a nice, quiet, calm way. And he just like that, he snapped up. And he turned over to me and he says, okay, I want you to come up and tell me what you want done. What am I supposed to do? Well, that wasn't really my intentions of coming in here and telling the doctor what he's supposed to do. No, no, that's not it. So I said, well, I'd like to continue dressing this boy. And I don't know what's going to happen, but I would like to continue dressing this boy with your help. And if we need to, well, before I got to if we need to, he looked at me and he says, do you understand what you're saying, Mr. Stoll? Do you understand what you're saying? And before I could answer that question, he immediately says, you're asking me to allow you to cripple this little child. This is the way he's going to be looked in just a few years. And he put his head forward like this. He won't be able to pick up his neck, and he won't be able to feed himself, and he'll be completely crippled. And he won't be able to turn around. And you're the one, you're asking me to do that to this little child. Do you understand what you're doing? Well, this was coming back, putting the shoe on the other foot. I wasn't quite ready for that kind of reaction. But I had decided that, I don't know why I said this. I really don't know. I shouldn't say that I decided because I hadn't, because I wasn't intending that kind of response. But I said, if that happens, would you be kind enough to do releases in skin graft? Because I wasn't going to take all that responsibility, because I didn't know. I knew what I knew, and I knew that, you know, some things do work, but I wasn't going to take responsibility to have the child grow up and his neck pointed down and his arms not able to feed himself. So he went like, visibly like that, you know. And he says, okay, I'm going to let you do it. I'm going to let you do it. But I'm going to have the nurses keep track of what's going on. I myself am not going to come back for a few days because I'm afraid if I see it, I'd stop you. But I have nurses who I'm very comfortable with, and if they see something going wrong, they're going to let me know, and I'm going to stop you. I said, okay, fine. That's all. That's fair game. So we followed it through. It wasn't long. A couple days later, he says, well, you know, you're probably okay to go home. I was like, oh, okay, really? He says, yeah, we'll come back every day if we have to. Well, let's make it every other day. Because they'd been watching what was going on. They were starting to get comfortable that, you know, this wasn't becoming infected. It had already been infected, and now it has cleaned up on its own. So they allowed me to go home. They allowed the patient to go home, and I was supposed to take care of him every other day they went in. They changed it every 3 days. We didn't know what we were doing back then. We did the best we could, and the patient healed. Eventually, he wanted to do skin grafting during the process a number of times. We always declined. And when he got to the point where it was healed, well, before it was completely healed, he said, he was kind enough, he said, well, you know, you're driving all this way into the hospital, and I've been watching this, and I haven't seen any reason to be alarmed, and you seem to know what you're doing. If you take care of him, and if you see anything dangerous, come back to see me. Otherwise, I want to see you in, I think it was 6 months or something like that. If everything goes, by that time it was shrinking enough that he could see that it was actually healing. So when we went back for that checkup, and I'll quickly finish this and move on. When we went back for that checkup, he came in. He was a busy doctor. He came in. He looked at the patient, whose name was David Ray, and he checked it over, didn't say anything, walked out, says, I'll be back in a few minutes. I got to check another patient. Walked out, checked another patient, came back, took another look at it, says, I'll be back in a few minutes. Walked out, I got to check another patient. Went somewhere else and checked another patient. In the meantime, one of the nurses came in and took a look at it. I says, and asked him, is Doctor coming back? Oh yeah, he's coming back. He's just looking at another patient. Come back in the third time, took a look at David, and then he says, turned around to me and says, well, I don't know what I can say. You'll call me a liar anyway. But this patient was supposed to have been, he was supposed to come back here for releases for long as he lives. He was supposed to be under my care. I don't even see him. So this was a 3-year-old child. He's now 21, 22, has absolutely no restrictions, is able to do everything. His scarring in front of his chest is not as nice, and it goes up into his neck. He still has some scarring under his chest. So things that I know today, I says, oh, I wish I knew that. Oh, I wish I knew that when I was taking care of David Ray. I didn't know it, but he has absolutely no restrictions. And that's the kind of thing that is amazing. And it talks about the B&W. It talks about what we do. It talks about what we see. It talks about as we journey through life of understanding each other. Had that doctor, even though how can I say this? Even though he wasn't necessarily the best in communicating, he was open-minded enough and he was outspoken enough that we knew exactly where he stood. Which in communication, that is so important. We don't have to do it that way, but we have to be clear of where we're at. It's not communicating if you walk around somewhere and the other guy has no clue where you're at. That's not communicating. Then suspicion comes in, doubt comes in, mistrust comes in, and you get all kinds of that kind of element going on. Whereas if we communicate, we know exactly where the person's at. We may not appreciate it, we may not agree, but we know where he's at. So we work from there. Okay, let me now quickly run through, and because we're on this subject, I'll mention a few things that burdock, or that the B&W does, and then I'll mention a few things that burdock does, and we'll just go through and we'll just touch them. And I won't go into detail because we could be here all day, but I'll just quickly mention a few points. One of the first points that does, and there's been a study on this, that it, for some reason, and I don't know why, what's in it that makes it do this, and I don't think that anybody understands. There's been a study done on wounds, and the B&W actually comes out on top as far as any salve or anything else that you can actually put on, whether be it antibiotics or not antibiotics, on all the germs, the bacteria, the viruses. It always wins. Why? I don't know. Time will tell. Scientists can tell us. I'm sure there are people that know. Mr. Troyer over here has that study with him. He knows what it is. And you might just mention what it is. I don't have it with me right now. So that's one of the things that B&W does. Let's remember that. I'm talking to people who aren't familiar with B&W. Most of us are, but some of us are not. The other thing that B&W does, it's able to debride tissue, dead tissue from live tissue, and no disrespect to any of our surgeons. When I saw the work that was done on that hand back there, I was in awe. That was tremendous how that was rebuilt. But no disrespect to our surgeons, but there's nobody that can divide live and dead tissue as good as your own body. God created that in a way that it separates. If you can keep infection out of it, the body can separate that in a way, a much better way than using our knives, which is what the B&W does. It keeps the infection out. Of all these cases that I've worked with, just to not, again, this could change tomorrow. I can say there was only one case that I saw infection, and that was not the ointment's problem. That was the actual, it was in a situation that, well, I'll just bring it out. Why? I saw this guy limping in with his sore foot, and he had his foot was all wrapped up, and I was like, you know, you do that to me, I don't know what's going on with your foot. You know, I got to know, because that's the type of person I am. Oh, he says, you want to see what I got? I says, I went and poured boiling water over my foot. Oh, really? But that was really, I really perked up. Okay, it's a burn. So he says, yeah. And so he took off his dressing, and he was he wasn't careful enough, okay? Let's put it this way, his dressing wasn't clean. And what did he have on it? He had dressing on it, he had a cabbage leaf on it. Cabbage leaf, never heard of using a cabbage leaf, but okay, it's a cabbage leaf. So when he was showing it to me, the cabbage leaf fell to the cement floor. Okay, what's going to happen now? As I was watching, so he just reached down, he picked it up and put it back on his wound. I was like, oh, please. He says, well, you know, I just lived across the road. Why don't we go over? I'll dress your wound for you. Oh, no. I haven't got time for that. I says, listen, let's try to dress that wound. You're going to get an infection in that wound. Oh, no. I'm doing this right. This is not going to happen. And he was a grown man, so what can you say? What can you say? But he did, to make this story short, he did develop an infection. We were able to get it under control. At that point, I told him he should go to the hospital and get antibiotics. But as you can see, he's not the type of person you can tell him to do anything. And I finally ended up, I got to stop going down these bunny trails, but I finally ended up making a little mark on his leg where the red was going up. And I says, okay, here it is. Here's our line. Does it cross up beyond that point? You're going to the hospital whether you want to or not. We're not going to lose your life just because you're stubborn. And he kind of, okay. He was willing to commit to that. It's okay, I had it. So we worked, and I worked with him, and I'm not going into how we did it, but anyway, we did keep that redness from going up, and it did heal up, but it was not a pleasant experience, and it was totally unnecessary. Okay, let's move on. So it fights infection. It divides. While I got onto that bunny material, it divides tissue from live from dead to help debride it. It also how can I say this? It provides nutrients for the skin cell to grow. So it's actually feeding the herbal product that's in there is feeding the cells in your body so that they can grow. Not only are we not doing harm, we're actually feeding the good cells with the B&W. It also is non-toxic. It's so non-toxic that you could eat it. There's nothing in there that, well, it doesn't taste good, mind you. It does have honey in it, so it doesn't, not that bad. But it's completely non-toxic, and I mean non-toxic. I had an eye injury, and it was painful because I had steel in my eye, and I was having it was an injury. I ended up putting the B&W in my eye, my own eye. I didn't do it in anybody else's, and I ended up putting the burdock over the top of it. You can't believe the sooziness of that, how it felt. The dirt was still in it. I had to go to the hospital to get it out. I did nothing for that. But at least I could live till I got there. Okay, so it's completely non-toxic. The other thing that it does, it covers and keeps the wound clean, which is the basic ABCs. You know, that's very simple. The other thing, the last thing that I'm going to put on the burdock and B&W is that it keeps the skin moist. And I know that this flies against all the medical knowledge that's out there. I know that. When you have a wound, you've got to keep it dry. They're afraid of infection. Here I'm saying that no, you don't want to keep it dry, you want to keep it moist. You know, for anybody that have never experienced this, never seen this, they're thinking I'm absolutely off my rocker. But stop and think. Just stop and think. How does skin, the beginning of skin, in what kind of an atmosphere does it grow? Before we're born, the amniotic fluids, it's moist. The baby's skin, it's as soft can be. And that's what we're trying to get to. We're trying to get that soft skin. There's no better way to get it than in a moist, infection-free environment. We have to keep that in mind. We're not trying to get infection. We're trying to get an environment that is completely moist. It's been fed, the skin cells are being fed, and the environment is very great for that kind of situation. Okay, but there's still several things that the B&W doesn't do. Now the burdock comes in and helps. We can't just put the B&W on. B&W has been studied. The B&W we know is great, but losing the burdock, we're going to lose. If we just throw the burdock out, we're going to lose something. We still haven't got all our bases covered. And I want to just talk a little bit about the burdock. The burdock itself, we discovered that there's a variety from Japan called gobo burdock. It's been used quite a bit. Its leaves are a bit bigger, its leaves are a bit thinner. And the reason I like the gobo is because with a child, when a child gets burned, or with long-term dressing, the burdock that we have in North America, the wild burdock, is too harsh. And we have a tendency to reject it. Our body becomes allergic to it. Our body can get allergic to anything. I've had patients that got allergic to B&W. Let's face it. We can have an allergy to anything. And when that happens, stop it. I don't care what you're doing. So we've had in the past, with children, we've had an allergic reactions to the wild burdock. We tried to get around that because we realized what it was. We tried to get around that by simply, soaking it in water longer, oftener, trying to get more of this, whatever's in it, out. That helps. And then along comes the gobo burdock, the Japanese variety, and it's way more gentle. I've had almost no problem with any allergies developing. I grow it. You can't find it anywhere else, so you grow it. And, growing burdock, a lot of people look at me as, you okay? No, I've long passed that point of being okay. So I grow my own burdock, and I use those leaves for what? Now let's get into what burdock actually does. And this I cannot explain. I'm sure there will be, if the world goes on, the science community, they're not interested because there's no money in it. But there will be people who will study it. We will know. When we apply the burdock to a burn, I've seen countless children screaming, coming in, serious wounds, heart-rending. You rush around and try to get everything ready. You apply the leaf, and the child looks up at you and he starts to smile. What happened? I've had almost invariably the parents will say, "What did you do?" I says, "I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. I just put the burdock leaf on." But what? And they're speechless. It is one of the best pain controls there are. One of the best. It does not, almost all the pain medications that I know of affect your bowels and how they work. This does not. No effect in any way on your body negatively. Coming to what else does the burdock do? The burdock not only is a pain control, and I don't know, and again, these things aren't studied. I'm only saying what I've seen. I'm only saying what I've observed. I'm only saying what I know because I've seen it happen. It draws blood into an area. It helps reduce inflammation, which is major in the beginning of a burn. So when we apply the burdock to the wound, we're trying to get all the blood flow into that area that we can get into it. We're trying to get all the swelling out of it that we can get out of it. We're trying to keep the pain under control. Major. The other thing that it does, and I still don't know why it does that, when we have and this happens to our people quite often, they'll be out, something happens and they get dragged on the road, like they get a road burn, they'll get gravel, they'll get dirt, you name it, into their wound. What do? Do I painstakingly pick every single kernel of gravel out of there? Do I try to wash everything out? Again, this flies against everything we've always known. No. First thing I do, B&W and burdock. Forget about the dirt. Forget about the gravel. When you take that leaf off, you look at it, whew, whatever. It draws out the foreign objects. It actually draws it right out of your body. Why does that? I don't know. It does. And it cleans that wound way cleaner than you can do with anything else. The last thing that the burdock will do is it's a non-stick bandage, which means that it's like peeling a banana. One of the worst things that you can do when you have a wound is have it grow onto your bandages and you jerk these things off and all your new skin cells that's been created are destroyed. Never. Has no connection whatsoever. It pulls this off. It comes off like it doesn't hurt at all. And granulated flesh, doesn't matter how deep the burn is, will not stick. When it's granulated flesh and new nerves, the poor patient is so tender, you can almost not do it without having pain, but on a regular wound, no pain. Okay, so now, what's left? What else is lacking? Something that's very important, and that is the thing that's lacking. We have our body will always put out toxins. When you eat debris, when the dead cells come out, they have to be removed. How are we going to do this? In what way are we going to do this? We've discovered that if we take olive oil, extra virgin cold pressed olive oil, we'll go across this. The extra virgin cold pressed olive oil will take off that B&W salve. It will clean off the whatever's there and keeps the wound, the burn, moist. Remember, we're flying against everything that we know, but we want to keep this moist at all times to avoid any damage to any skin tissues. If I see any blood, when I'm doing this cleaning, if I see any blood, I failed. Because that means I've been too harsh. That means that it took me a long time, long time before I could actually let's just leave that white skin till next time. Because to me it was, it's got to come off. This is white skin, it's dead, it's got to come off. And I would work on that, and the first thing I know, it'd be bleeding. So it took me a long time, even for myself, to where I was comfortable to say, okay, and I'd work on this, I'd try to get it off, but if I could see it's not coming, I'd say, well, let's give it another 12 hours, let's give it another 24 if we need to. and see what happens. And I've never yet had a bad experience. Never. And I've been working with this for close to 20 years. Okay, having said that, let's turn over now. That has been said to that people can understand why we're doing what we're doing, why we become so adamant, why we're afraid to go into the hospital, why we don't want to go here and there. But what I need to talk to the rest of you. Why is it necessary to go into the hospital? Why do I? Why should I? Because there are things that we cannot take care of. There are times when if we don't go to the hospital, it causes the life of a person, especially when children are involved. It has nothing to do with are we able to take care of burns. It has everything to do, will this person live? Will this person live to grow up, or will he die? His burn might very well heal, but if he's no longer alive, we failed, obviously. That's a very obvious statement. We need those hospitals. They know how to take care. They know what the first signs of shock are. They know when it's time to do something. And I would say the biggest hindrance for our people, the hardest for me, was persuading them to go in, because they were afraid. If we go in, does that mean that we have to do what they say, even though what they're going to do is not as good as what I know to do? And that fear is not what I want to see. We need to overcome that. We need to go in. We may need to work with our doctors, with our hospitals. We need to communicate. We need to understand each other. We need to be compassionate with each other. And it's because somebody looks at it a different way than we do. We need to understand that that's the direction they're coming from. Just this last, and I'm going to tell you this experience, this is not, I don't know whether I failed. I still don't know. I don't know whether I should, whether I should blame myself and keep on blaming myself. But in Ontario, when there's a serious burn, I invariably get called to the site at some point. I have caretakers all over Ontario, lots of them, but when they come up against it, they'll call me, and I need to go up and give my opinion. There was a child, 10 years old. He was on a riding lawnmower. He was not of our own people. He was on the riding lawnmower. He and his brother, he was 10 years old, his brother was 9. And I'll just quickly go through this story. How's my time coming? I think I've lost. Am I okay for this story? And when he was running low in gas, so they walked up to this gas tank, or they drove up to this gas tank. He sat on this riding lawnmower, his seatbelt on him, and his brother jumped off, and they put the hose into the tank, and he started pumping one of these hand pumps, and the gas goes squirt, squirt, squirt. And this lawnmower was hot. What happened? But this hose comes out. Boom, and it goes right over him. Boom, hits him. And almost instantly he was inflamed. This is a nightmare of a story, something you never want to hear. The child, things happen here that I don't even understand. Things that I always thought I knew, I don't know. I don't know. That's the life is. It seems like our knowledge is this way, that the larger our knowledge comes, the larger the shoreline is of the unknown. It's like a lake. If you look at a lake, a small pond only has a small shoreline out around it. A lake has a larger. An ocean, the shoreline around the ocean is so huge that we can't even imagine. So that's the way it seems in life. The more we learn, the more shoreline there is that we don't know. But they cooled off this boy, and I still can't understand how this happened, but the neighbor, they went and got one of the caretakers who came and they dressed it was burdock and BMW, not realizing the seriousness of the burn, which I failed in giving enough teaching that depending if it's, but that's John's territory today. But you know, if it's hot water, it's one thing. Fire, it's another thing. And when you get a fire burn, you never know the depths until later. But just to give you a little idea, and then we'll move on. I'll try to finish this story, and then I'll be done. He had his whole chest from right up here. Didn't hit his face. He hit his chest, side to his back, halfway around. He had full circumference burn on his arm, from up here in his shoulder down to just the tip of his finger. Full circumference burn on everything. Full circumference burn. And they dressed it in ignorance, let's put it that way. And that's the thing, again, if they had a hospital where they would have been comfortable with, I think they would have gone in. They weren't. So they just dressed it in ignorance, thinking, well, we can take care of the burn. Okay, so we can take care of the burn. Let's put it that way. We can take care of the burn. There's so many other things that can go wrong. You know, when you get burned in this area, and I'm not a doctor, but what happens to your justice system? I don't know. There are things here that I don't know. I don't know what happens. I don't even know what happens with your muscles in here when they get burned. But I've seen enough of it that I know that this poor child walked like this, you know, and he could hardly move. He was in pain, which we don't see with burdock. There's something going on that we don't understand. The first time that I went up, which was after about 3 weeks after the burn had happened, they finally called me and asked me to come up and take a look at it. So I went up and saw it. I told the parents, I said, look, you have to take this boy into the hospital. You have to. I backed up and he says, why? I said, because this is way too serious for us to take care of. This is way too serious. I said, this is a full circumference burn, which means the skin's going to have to grow from up here down to wherever it has to go, from up here up this way. It has to grow from all sides in, and it's way too large a burn for this small body to heal. This is way more than we can handle. This is not just a little tiny pint-sized thing. And he looked at me and said, can you promise that he won't be crippled if he goes in? And I told him, before that I said, at the very best, we're going to have a crippled boy if we don't go in. Seriously crippled boy. And he looked at me and says, can you promise me there won't be crippled if he goes into the hospital? I said, well, I can't promise you anything, but it's your best bet. You know, let's face it, there's times when we need to go in. And I'm explaining this to you so that you know there are times when we have to make those tough decisions and go. But he denied it. He was not going to go in. And I went up 3 times. I told our caretakers, I told him, the minute that I see that this boy starts showing signs of dehydration, shock, indigestion, any of that kind of thing, I don't care what you say. I'm calling 911. Says, I'm reporting you. Okay. Says, you don't have to do that. All you have to do is tell me, and I'll go. Oh, okay. Well, that was reassuring. But I said, I'm not playing with this. I said, this is serious. You need to go in. You need to go in as soon as you can. But on the same token, the caretaker asked me, what are we supposed to do? These people don't know how to take care of this boy. I said, well, you can't drop him. You can't stop. Okay, you started this. You can't stop. You have to see this to the end. You can always tell them. You can keep on telling them, but you can't stop. You're not allowed to stop. You're not allowed to just walk out and say, well, I don't care anymore. That's negligence. You can't do that. Okay, so they agreed to stay with the case. Needless to say, time went on. It went from May till March of the following year. I had told him that to heal this kind of a wound will take at the very least 2 years, and we're going to have all kinds of scarring. There's no way that I can see that we can work with this. Our best option was get your skin grafting done as soon as possible. But they refused. And at one point, and then's when I probably should have intervened, but I saw nothing of them. I told my caretaker, you let me know if anything develops that's life-threatening. If it's just a matter of being crippling, we can probably do surgery and get rid of that and take care of it. But his arm, because they didn't know what they were doing, his arm actually grew together down here. Talking about a doctor's nightmare, that would have been. Still he refused to go, and still I struggled. Should I turn these parents in? Should I? Should I? I said, well, it's not life-threatening, and probably a couple more months is nothing's going to change. Let's give them a little time. They'll surely, if I keep working on them, if we keep working on the parents, they will. But then someone else stepped in and took care of it. I didn't have to. They were turned in. But that, talking about communication, that broke down all communications on burdock and B&W. With a doctor that had seen that. And I do not blame them in any way. And I still don't know to this day what I should have done. Okay, I'm going to open it up for questions, and then I'm going to step down. Yes?
You talked about your fears of going to the hospital. What are your cultural beliefs that kind of make you hesitant?
I don't think that it's a cultural belief as much as, well, you have to understand that maybe I'm talking too much from perspective of Canada. The Canadian laws and the U.S. laws are, I wish we had more laws like the U.S. does. Canada, because of the socialist country that we're at, they consider it their responsibility to take care of a child, and it's not the parents' responsibility, which means that the parents have no rights to the child in reality. They have no say in the matter. It's just the way it is. So that's unfortunate, but that's the way Canada has it. But our people, I would say their greatest fear is not culturally, it's because they have seen so many things happen in smaller burns. They don't necessarily realize that in a large wound, not the same thing can happen. That there's other things that can go wrong. So they interpret this, okay, so it worked great for so-and-so's small wound, it'll work for this too. And we go blissfully on. They won't get infected. They won't, because of what I've said, they're spared all that kind of pain, but it's still an awful load on the body. Have I answered your question? Anything else?
The 2-year-old boy, you said he had had a skin graft
Yeah.
before you started to treat him. Did that fall off, or did that get removed because of the infection? Or did that graft stay, and you were able to heal with the burn wound application without removing the skin graft?
No, that skin graft completely disintegrated. There was nothing left.
That's what
Nothing.
I was hearing.
Okay, there was another hand back, a little bit
Yeah,
back.
my question is, you talked about the importance of keeping the wound moist, the burn moist. And so I would like to hear a little bit about how can you tell, because I've seen a lot of wounds, they get gooey, and then that's like the first stage before infection. Many times they're red, gooey, infected. So what's the difference between that and keeping it moist? Does it get gooey with the B&W and the burdock, or it's
That's an excellent question, and it deserves an answer, a really good answer. I think probably John would be better qualified to answer that than I am, but I will attempt to answer it. When you have a really, really deep wound, and you all of a sudden, you don't normally see that oozy, really moist looking thing that you're describing, but when you see that, we actually take steps to remove that moisture.
okay. I'll ask you.
Anything else? Yes.
You were saying that the burdock was able to lift the dirt and the debris out of some of the road wounds and various things. So do you wash the wound prior to administering the B&W and the burdock? And if so, how do you add anything, soap or hydrogen peroxide or any other things at all?
That again will be difference in opinions because it's done different ways. We don't wash it in the terms that you're thinking of washing. Okay, they'll probably put water, let water run over it. They'll try to get some of the biggest dirt that's there off, but we don't try to wash it with any kind of anti-infection soap or scrubbing or any of that stuff. We just kind of get the worst of it off that you can see so that it looks relatively clean and then dress it. It's not clean, but no stretch. Okay, is there anything else? I think we'll leave it at that for now. You can always ask John questions. He knows more about it than I do. Thank you.